What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel, and today we are going to cover the next installment in our hidden gems list here on Madden 21. And we're going to cover defensive tackles today. Players that can bolster your run stuffing game and even help you out in the pass rush. We're going to hit them all today, and there is quite a good list here for you guys. This isn't going to be one of those lists where we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, and it's not one of those lists that we need to even dip into players that are low overalls. You can get value defensive tackles at a 70 overall or higher, and there's quite a few of them, and we're going to dip into those today. And the first thing that I want to cover is obviously the honorable mention players, but these are going to be pretty obvious and straightforward here to start the video. We're going to be talking about guys that you're seeing here on the free agency list, guys like Damon Harrison Sr., somebody that's been around for a long time that you could absolutely plug and play into your defense if that is the type of thing that you're seeking to do. But in addition to that, there are some other good veterans that are out here and available, guys like Marcel Darius that are fantastic run stuffers in the game, even at his advanced age at 30 years old. Guys like Brandon Mebane, even Corey Legit, Xavier Williams. You're talking about quite a few guys that can have an immediate impact on your team. But that's not what we're here for today, because those are just honorable mentions. We're here for guys that could potentially be long-term solutions for your team. And the first one of those players is actually going to be, I think I skipped him. Yeah, Miles Brown here. Miles Brown out of Wofford. Now, I don't know why he has such a good rating here out in free agency, but this has got to be one of the best players on this list. And the reason being is that at this point in Madden, he's free. He's out here in free agency, and when you look at his stats, he is a good defensive tackle. He's a 66 overall at 22 years old. That's going to be a mid-round draft pick in a lot of draft classes, and that's a guy that can add a lot of value to your team for absolutely nothing at all. So this guy is one of the top guys on this list strictly just because he is one of the few players that we've seen so far this year that is like a second-year player and is out here in free agency. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the actual teams, and we'll get through the rest of the hidden gem players that are out here. There are quite a few, like I said, and you know, quite a few actually pretty good overall. So the first one here is actually going to be on the Bears, and we're going to be talking about Bilal Nichols. The reason that I feel Bilal Nichols would be a potential add for you guys is because Eddie Goldman is such a good player here for the Bears. Now, Eddie Goldman is injured, so it might take some convincing to get Bilal Nichols off of this team, but he's one that is absolutely worth noting because he is a fantastic player as a 4-3 defensive tackle, or even a 3-4 defensive tackle, and so somebody that you absolutely have to take into consideration. And if you're seeking to add somebody that can be a long-term solution at the position, you might want to seek out Bilal Nichols and do your best to try and add him to your squad. The next player is one of my personal favorites. He's a player that I feel like plays like an absolute monster, and that's Harrison Phillips. Harrison Phillips in this game is an absolute beast. He's got 92 strength, he's got good run stuffing stats, and he even adds a little bit in the pass rushing game as a 24-year-old at 73 overall. Very good defensive tackle for what his rating actually is, and I've taken him and turned him into pretty much a stud D tackle before, so I highly recommend you guys check him out. The next player to talk about is the Chargers. It's going to be Jerry Tillery. Jerry Tillery is one that, again, you might have a little bit of trouble acquiring him because Linval Joseph is getting up there in age, and so Jerry Tillery might be looking to be the future starter for this team at that spot as the number 1 D tackle. But Jerry Tillery is somebody that hasn't proven a lot so far in his tenure in the NFL, but he is a player that could be absolutely beneficial to pretty much any team if you're able to acquire him. I don't think I need to say much more other than the fact that he's got that good 72 overall, 23 years old combination there. And then we can also talk about Justin Jones here on the Chargers, who, you know, might not be quite as much of a value as Jerry Tillery, but still only 24 years old, a little bit weaker, but somebody that will help you in the front 7 of your team. The next ones that we're going to talk about are actually on the Chiefs today, and there are, a couple that we can talk about here. And the first being Derek Nandi. This is the highest overall player on this list, and the only reason that he's available on this list is because of how many D tackles they have on this team that are reasonably effective at what they do, and then Chris Jones being in front of all of them. So realistically speaking, this team doesn't need Derek Nandi around, and if you could convince the Chiefs to give up Derek Nandi, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be a fantastic add to your team. And even at that, Kalen Saunders is another guy that is a fantastic addition, so I wanted to definitely mention those two. The next player is a player that I like quite a bit, and that is Tristan Hill. He's another one that has a bit of potential, has decent athleticism between all of his stats, and with the drafting of Neville Gallimore and him being a 70 overall as a rookie, that kind of makes this defensive tackle situation here for the Cowboys a little bit more fluid and potentially frees up the availability of a trade for Tristan Hill. Now, as we go through some of these, probably about the last half of these, I just want to emphasize the fact that I'm not capturing every single defensive tackle on this list that could be on this list. I could include quite a few more that are in the lower 60s and stuff like that, but realistically speaking, with this position, there are so many players like this that are 71 overall, that are young, that are sitting behind various other starters on a team, or there were other rookies drafted around them to kind of take over at that spot. There are so many players like this that you shouldn't have to dig into the 60 overalls to really find somebody that's going to help your team out, and that's one of the things that I want to emphasize. With that being said, we're going to move on to one of my personal favorites, which is Devonte Godsey, and I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, but this guy plays like a monster, and I know that he's a little bit older on this list at 25 years old and at a 76 overall, but he plays outside of what his rating is, and I know that he's slow, he's not really that athletic, to be quite honest with you guys, but he's a really good run stopper, and in not even that, he is also a pretty good pass rusher. I've gotten a lot of production out of him in multiple different franchises, and I like him quite a bit. Personally speaking, I see no reason why he wouldn't be available with the drafting of Raekwon Davis, and then the addition of having other good defensive ends and stuff that could play at some of these positions. Jonathan Ledbetter being a 22-year-old guy that can kind of move over and also play at the D tackle position and things like that. So, Christian Wilkins as well on top of that. It frees up the defensive line here to potentially deal away Devonte Godsey for a reasonable price. But somebody that I certainly always have at the top of my list because I've just gotten really good production out of him. So he's potentially one of those players that is just programmed to play well. So that is worth noting as we go through this list. The next player that I want to talk about is a player that, if I'm not mistaken, we've talked about before, but when I did the prior videos on the D-line, I'm pretty sure that he was listed as a defensive end, and now Madden moved him to a D tackle, and that is John Kaminski. And there's a reason that we had him on the list for both defensive end videos, and that's because he is just a very, very well-rounded player with 82 speed, 84 strength, 81 agility, 84 acceleration, and decent stats in his intangible categories as well. At 24 years old and a 70 overall and sitting behind guys like Grady Jarrett and Tyler Davidson, John Kaminski is a guy that, we've already mentioned twice. This has to be one of the best hidden gems in the game in general, just because of his good combination of all of his stats and his ability to play different positions. And I really don't think he's going to cost very much to go out and get him. So absolutely make sure you guys give the Falcons a shout in your franchises and see if you can pick up John Kaminski to try and bolster your front sevens. Now, this one gets a little bit interesting because we're going to go to the Washington football team, and the Washington football team is a little strange. They have so many good defensive linemen in Madden that it's almost kind of scary. And realistically speaking, I could put any one of these defensive tackles on this list, and in fact, that's what I'm doing. If you can get any one of these D tackles between Ioannidis, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, or Tim Settle, you guys should be doing it because these guys are fantastic players. Personally speaking, I have had a ton of success with Daron Payne and Matthew Ioannidis. I haven't tried out Jonathan Allen too much himself, but he also looks like a very good player, and he's a very similar player to Daron Payne and Matthew Ioannidis. So with that being said, you guys have to give the Falcons, the football team a look, and the reason being is primarily just the fact that this team is in a very unstable phase in their roster building. And a lot of these guys end up being available. I have been in a few different franchises where people that play for the Washington football team or control the Washington football team immediately put all of their defensive linemen on the trade block because you don't need all of these guys on your team. And so they become available to other guys, and with this team having so many needs at other positions, this is a good trade chip for the football team, and these guys are absolutely all available. So while Matthew Ioannidis kind of age-wise and overall-wise doesn't fit my initial criteria, he has to be mentioned on the list. And same thing with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne being higher overalls than I would normally include on the list. They have to be included because of the specific situation that's going on here, and the fact that they could at least get rid of one of these guys and still have two very good starting defensive tackles with a rookie backing him up. So absolutely make sure you guys go out and look at the Washington football team and see what they have to offer and see if these guys would fit your team. The next one that we're going to talk about is actually Taven Bryan on the Jaguars, and this is absolutely a player that is programmed to play better than what his stats show. I know I've talked about this in the past, but Taven Bryan plays like a beast, and I've had him this year in Madden. It's no different story, and he's certainly available with the drafting of Davon Hamilton out of Ohio State. Taven Bryan is just a fantastic football player in Madden 21, and like I said, a player that I go out and get multiple times in various different franchises, a guy that I like to target, and if I am the Jaguars, I like to build around Taven Bryan because he plays really, really well. So make sure you guys check him out as well. The next player that we're going to talk about is on the Packers, and that is Daylon Mack. Daylon Mack is a player that I like to consider because there's been a couple times in franchises that the Packers, for whatever reason, cut ties with him, or they put him on the practice squad and things like that. And not only that, I mean, you could probably trade for him reasonably, but at 23 years old, a 65 overall, and 86 strength and things like that, he's going to be a very effective defensive lineman if you give him a couple development points. So he's one of the ones that are on the lower end that if you're looking for a cheap option or you're looking for somebody that might be free out there, depending on what the Packers decide to do with him, certainly keep an eye out for the name Daylon Mack and see if you guys couldn't add him to your team as well. The next player that I like to talk about is on the Rams, and this is A'Shawn Robinson. And typically speaking, I wouldn't include him on the list because he's the number one on this team. But the one thing that you have to consider is he's been around for 4 years, which means his contract situation is fluid at this point, which means he could find himself as a free agent in the near future. He could find himself traded in the near future. He's been around for 4 years and hasn't produced as much as I think that they would have liked him to. And so this is a player that could be potentially there for your picking at certain points in a franchise, whether that be somebody's controlling the Rams and they're looking to move on from him and find somebody else to play that position for them, or whether he sneaks his way into free agency or something like that. He will be out there and available, and he plays very well. He's another one of these Alabama D tackles that is a big mamma jamma, and he stuffs the run really well, and he adds a little bit of value in the pass rushing game. So somebody that is absolutely worth keeping your eye on. The next player is Poona Ford on the Seahawks, and this guy is another one that for whatever reason in multiple franchises continues to end up out there in free agency and things like that. I think it's because of Reid being in front of him, but Poona Ford is a very good player. I've played this guy at D tackle, I've played him at defensive end, I've played him all over the field, or I guess I shouldn't say all over the field, but all over the D line, and he continues to produce. And so you guys will notice a theme with these D tackles is that a lot of these guys are guys that I've personally personally used that produce really, really well, and Poona Ford is one of them. I know that he was a starter for one of my friends in one of our franchises last year, and he played like an absolute stud. So Poona Ford, one of the last couple that I want you guys to keep your name on. And actually, that is the last one. The other one was the free agent that I wanted to emphasize, which was Miles Brown, and we already talked about him. So that is my list of D tackles that you guys could go out and get for your teams, and they would immediately bolster your front seven. They'd immediately improve your defensive line. Hopefully this helps you guys out in some way. Hopefully it helps you guys kind of dial in which defensive linemen to go after and which ones to keep your eye out for if they hit free agency or anything like that, or if they hit the trade block, because a lot of these guys play really well and they play outside of their ratings. So make sure you guys keep an eye out for these players. And if this does help you, leave a like on the video, comment down below for whatever you guys would like to see next, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a good night.